a comprehensive overhaul of U.S. Taiwan policy. That's what a bill vows to do amid heightened threats from China. NTD's Iris Tao has more on the Senate's latest move on the legislation.
With strong bipartisan support, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on Wednesday approved a bill that its architects say could overhaul U.S. policy toward Taiwan. Called the Taiwan Policy Act, the bill in its current form would provide $4.5 billion in defense aid to the democratically ruled island. It would also designate Taiwan as a major non-NATO ally and rename Taiwan's de facto embassy in Washington. Here's Senator Kevin Cramer's take on it.
We have to take strong measures to send strong signals to the leadership in China that we are not going to just sort of roll over or sit back, but rather take their aggression very seriously.
While senators who sponsor the bill have said its goal is not to change U.S.-Taiwan policy, the White House has expressed concerns over the bill amid increasingly tense relations with Beijing.
There are elements of that legislation with respect to how we can strengthen our security assistance for Taiwan that are quite effective and robust, that will improve Taiwan's security. There are other elements that give us some concern.
And what would you say about concerns that it could hurt U.S.-China relations?
Well, I think that the leadership in China have already made that a high priority. And that is, they've chosen to hurt the relationship. They've chosen to be much more aggressive. We can't simply sit back and not respond.
I can understand that there should be some considerations in regards to that, but if it benefits Taiwan and the United States, then we should do it.
Meanwhile, the future of the Taiwan Policy Act is still uncertain. Upon passage in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, it still needs to pass the whole Senate, not to mention the fact that there's still not a companion bill to it in the House. But Congressman Steve Chabot tells me that he's hopeful that it's going to bring real changes.
Well, we're glad that the senators are working on this right now. I would like to see something in the House comparable to this. And I think it's far overdue that we do away with this strategic ambiguity.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell has been targeted by the FBI. Lindell said that the FBI seized his phone on Tuesday after their 3 cars surrounded him at a Hardee's drive-thru in Minnesota. Lindell said the agents asked him about voting machines in Colorado and a county clerk who oversees elections. The MyPillow CEO said he told the agents he relies on his phone to run 5 companies and that his hearing device is connected to the phone. Lindell handed over the phone after calling his lawyer. He said he was not given a chance to back up the contents before the FBI took it. Lindell has been an advocate for election integrity and vocal about allegations of widespread election fraud in the 2020 election. In light of the news from Mike Lindell and recent reports of a Chinese spy at Twitter, we have Jason Miller, the CEO of Gettr. He was also a senior advisor for former President Trump. Jason Miller, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Thanks for having me.
Jason, former Twitter security chief, now whistleblower Peter Zatko made some pretty astonishing revelations on the Hill yesterday. He alleges that Twitter knowingly allowed a Chinese spy to work at the company. As CEO of a social media company yourself, what do you make of it, and would you think there are some type of best practices in place for these type of situations?
Yeah, very troubling revelations from the whistleblower testimony on Capitol Hill yesterday. The fact that Twitter would allow an active agent, an active spy from the CCP to be infiltrating their midst. And again, to take it that next step forward, though, the reason why they allowed this person to stay in their position was because Twitter is so dependent now on mainland China for revenue streams. They didn't want to upset, they don't currently want to upset the CCP. Now, if I'm Republicans on Capitol Hill, or Democrats should be doing as well, Mark Warner has actually been pretty good on this, the Democrat from Virginia. I hope there are follow-ups and letters being fired off to Twitter saying, who is this CCP spy and why have they not yet been removed from your ranks?
Jason, when it comes to security and privacy, isn't this the holy grail of really any platform that relies on the trust of their users?
Well, it really is, because you're making that pact with your users, that you will protect their information, that they will have a safe environment for which to operate from. And especially with something like Twitter, where the other comment that Zacko made was that literally a number of employees could go and manipulate or impact user accounts just on their own with no restrictions. That's very troubling, very problematic, because at the moment, Twitter is in many cases the public utility when it comes to the digital town square around the world. That's why Elon Musk was going after Twitter initially and not going after, say, CNN or the New York Times, because Twitter reaches virtually every country on the planet. And I think that this is part of the reason why we launched Gettr, is to put some competition into that, to decentralize some of these free speech rights, to make sure that not all of our communications are being held by a company as troubled as Twitter.
Really excellent point. Jason, I'd like to ask you about the Chinese-affiliated TikTok. It's been reported that they're collecting massive amounts of data from Americans, which could ultimately be weaponized against us. Is there anything the current administration can do to stop this?
Absolutely. I think that the Biden administration should be putting the request into both Apple and Google Play to remove TikTok from their online stores. I think also that they should consider banning TikTok from the United States. It was something that, quite frankly, I wish President Trump had done before he left office. And the reason being isn't so much that it's not just a matter of the data security. It's even graver than that. Here's my concern. Right now, TikTok's algorithm is very sophisticated. It's very developed. And as you go through, they're telling you what you're going to want to see before you even think that you know what you want to see. They know how to read your mind better than you do. So let's take our younger people. You can join TikTok at the age of 13. Think about our 13-year-olds today as they become 23, 33, 43. The CCP is going to have a psychographic analysis of the interests, the desires, the motivating factors for an entire generation of Americans. They will know more about our own people than we do. Think then how that impacts election interference, impacts thoughts of, as say China goes to invade Taiwan, and what they can do with manipulating what information is seen, what isn't seen. And it's really scary, again, these psychographic footprints, psychographic analyses that they're going to have on millions of Americans. That's a national security threat.
Speaking of data, Trump supporter Mike Lindell has had his phone confiscated as of last night by the FBI, allegedly. We're seeing a rather ominous pattern here, Jason. As someone who worked for the former president and knows him well, what's your reaction to all of this?
Well, I'm very troubled by the politicization of these law enforcement moves, and with particular regard to Mar-a-Lago. There still hasn't been anything that's been put forward saying that any item that President Trump had there, whether it was declassified or not, it was a national security threat. And what we're rapidly becoming are Cuba or Venezuela or any of these authoritarian governments where the criminal justice system or law enforcement is just an extension of whoever's in power. The concern is then, let's say Republicans take over. Do they then seek out retribution using the government and law enforcement and things of that nature against the Democrats? And then Democrats take over and the cycle continues. That's not how America is supposed to work. I'm very concerned that so much of this is all about politics. I mean, take a look at Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, actually campaigned in 2018 on locking up President Trump. So guess what she's trying to do now that she's the Attorney General of New York? Lock him up. Fani Willis, the DA in Atlanta, who has formed the grand jury to look into Trump and Trump-related orbit or people in the broader Trump circle, also very politically motivated. The concern here also is that Americans start to lose all confidence in the FBI, in our DOJ, and especially with all the turbulence we've seen over recent years with the Mueller witch hunt and things of that nature, I worry about our being able to put the genie back in the bottle here.
Gettr CEO Jason Miller, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much.
Over $1.3 billion in COVID-19 relief funds for small businesses could potentially be defrauded. A watchdog report found that the money got sent overseas. The Small Business Administration Office of Inspector General said in its report on Monday that many applications for the loans were made using foreign IP addresses. There were over 200,000 such applications and over 41,000 were approved. This raises fear that the relief fund was granted to international criminal organizations. This happened between March 2020 and November 2021. The relief fund was part of the economic injury disaster loan dating back to the Trump era. The watchdog says it is investigating. President Biden got behind the wheel at the Detroit Auto Show. Biden announced funding for electric vehicle charging stations.
I'm pleased to announce we're approving funding for the first 35 states, including Michigan, to build their own electric charging infrastructure throughout their state.
Biden approved the first $900 million for electric vehicle chargers. The money is part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. Biden is also touting the huge new climate bill that offers tax incentives for buying electric vehicles.